And the other thing, which I was given towards the end of my time on the show, which was as a gift, was...
Whoa!
You see that? Mythbusters time. Well,
Peter, welcome to Try This at Home. Thank you so much for joining us.
thanks, Cliff. It's great to be here.
It is so exciting. We were talking a little bit before we rolled that you're the first person from the camera crew that we've gotten to talk to, and it is exciting because every week Harrison and I are like, how did they possibly go about shooting this impossible show? So we're so excited to get to pick your brain about that, but we always love to start by hearing people's origins. I'd love to know how you got on the path into this weird and wonderful business.
Oh, man. I finished high school, and all I knew was that I did not want to go to university. I did not want to do more study. And I was 17, and I was at the pub, which I shouldn't have been, and it took a long time to get served that particular day, and I started chatting to this guy next to me, and he was a cameraman. And I bought, that's right, I got served first, and I bought him a beer. It probably cost me like 40 cents back then. And about a week later, I bumped into him again, and he said, "You still looking for a job?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he introduced me to another cameraman who needed an assistant for 3 weeks, and here we are, all these years later. That simple, that 40-cent beer.
Wow. That's amazing. So what interested you specifically about the camera side of the industry when you started to get into it?
Well, I was offered a job as an assistant cameraman. I guess that was, had a lot to do with it. I'm kind of, never much of a writer. People like Griffo, or Anthony, as you like to call him, now he's a writer. But no, I'm more of a technical kind of guy. And, I like the way you've got to put it together. You've got to make sure you get this shot that'll cut in with that shot. And it was just a bit of a no-brainer for me. Always interested. As a kid, I like to take things apart. And actually, as an adult, I still like to take things apart and put them back together. And often they all start working again.
That's the important bit that I often forget, is it has to work again when you're done.
Well, it doesn't always work
the
again.
same.
What was at the time, we as you mentioned, Anthony, and we've had Andrew Farrell on the show and others, and I think for a lot of people it's always a surprise when they hear that Mythbusters was an Australian show, but it sounds like Australia has had a very healthy production industry for a time. What has been, and when you started out, what was the production scene like?
Well, when I started, there was very little production of these sort of shows outside of TV. It was mostly the TV stations that made them themselves, the networks. And it kind of, I feel like it changed in the late 80s. A lot of cameramen anyway, came up, through the TV stations, but then everyone started being freelancers. We all got made redundant and had to go out and buy expensive TV cameras and freelance. And yeah, I got made redundant. I'd been in the industry for about 10 years or so. And suddenly I was out there, and I've been a freelancer for about, I hate to say it, but about 30 years now.
Wow.
Yeah,
I don't know that people imagine that or think about camera operators on shows having to buy their own camera and being freelance. You see these massive productions, and people don't even think about that.
Yeah, well, for me, I got a call, would you like to come and work on this new TV show? Well, it was newish, and I'd never heard of it. It wasn't on in Australia at that point. And I was like, well, I don't have a digital Betacam. I had an SP Betacam, an older model. And to buy a new digital Betacam was like $80,000 to $100,000, and that was without a lens. And even the batteries, and this is late night, this is 2004 I started on the show, even the batteries were like $800 each, and which is just ridiculous when I look at it now. But I looked around and I found a second-hand camera, so it was only $40,000. Luckily I already had a couple of lenses I could put on it. It was a huge investment, but most of the guys I know bought new cameras, and I figured, well, second-hand one will work just as well.
That is amazing. So when did you first hear about Mythbusters? Were you already doing any work with Beyond, or how did that come about?
I'd done a lot of work with Beyond. I worked on Beyond 2000 with Anthony and Faz, or Andrew. Yeah, I worked with both those guys on Beyond 2000, which was... Yeah, that was a fun show. You'd be travelling all around the world, and going to these places and watching these amazing. It was a show about technology, new technology, and they would we'd meet the creators of this stuff, and it was great to see it. But what it kind of made me realise the value of marketing, because people were producing these extraordinary inventions that I never ever saw again, and a lot of them I think never made it to market, because they were like inventors that I've come to realise that actually marketing is just as important as inventing.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, we've heard so much about Beyond 2000. I feel like we need to do a special episode where we watch Beyond 2000, because it seems like it was the genesis show for so many of the Mythbusters crew, especially.
Yeah, it really was. And I was actually living in New York at the time when I first saw Beyond 2000. And I was like, but they got a new host for it, an American host. He reminded me a bit of Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. But so they had
that charismatic. Wow.
Yeah. No, he was more charismatic than Ned, but he had a similar moustache. But yeah, and I remember watching it in New York and thinking, wow, a lot of the presenters they sound like they've got Australian accents, but the host has got an American accent, and they didn't have broad Australian accents. So I was really kind of puzzled. Is this an Australian show? What's going on here? And I wasn't aware of Beyond 2000. I lived in New York for quite a while, so I wasn't aware of Beyond Productions, I mean. And so when I moved back from New York to Sydney, I heard about Beyond Productions and went in and introduced myself and got some work on the show, and I just loved it. I thought it was such a great show.
Yeah, we need to check that out, because it seems like such a birth of everything that we love on Mythbusters got tried out there or got tested, or a lot of those voices got sharpened. What did you think when you first heard about Mythbusters?
Well, one of my first thoughts was, A, I've got to buy a really expensive camera. B, go away for 3 months and leave the family in Sydney. And there was C too, but I can't think of it. And I just thought, it's really unlikely. And my kids were quite young at that point, and so I spoke to my wife and said, there's this show, it looks like it'd be pretty good fun. And she said, yeah, you can go. And I'm like, righto, I'm off. I bought myself a camera, and if you say yeah, that's fine. So off I went for 3 months, and what a ride that was. It was, probably after about 2 months, I spoke to I spoke to her before then, but I said to my wife, I think you should come over. I want to stay for longer. And so that 3 months that I originally signed up for became 4 months, and then she brought the kids over and we put them in school and over in California. And that just went from there. We spent often probably 8 to 12 months a year in California, and then we'd bring the kids back here and they'd be in school back here. So, I mean, they had a charmed life, man. We were living on houseboats in Sausalito. They had a great school at both ends. So, yeah, it was, ideal.
Oh, there's so many things in there I now have to ask about. To start out with, what was kind of the pitch or the offer? What were they looking for to bring you onto the show for that initial 3 month stretch? What was the need at that point?
Well, the cameraman who'd first shot it, Paul, who's a good mate of mine, he was just feeling pretty worn out by it. Those first episodes and I can't think what they call them. Those first episodes anyway, but the pilot shows, they were doing 6 days a week, long days, and after I think he was over here for probably 8 months or more, he was just like ground to a paste. So he wasn't up for coming back for more of it. But we changed it from a 6 day week to a 5 day week, and it was still a tiring schedule. After 3 months or 4 months, everyone needed a bit of a break. You needed a couple of weeks off to draw breath and get some energy back. So I'm just trying to think what the original thing was. I think they just said, look, we need a cameraman, someone who's quick on their feet. And I'd come from a news background where you don't get to set stuff up. You've got to react to what's going on and not miss the action. That's obviously really crucial. And be able to shoot it in such a way, not just point the camera and roll and roll and roll. You've got to get shots that'll actually cut together. So, I was used to doing that, and so I got off the job.
For the benefit of our listeners, I think sometimes when people think about cinematography or cameramen, they may think of like a movie where everything is planned in advance. But as you just mentioned, on shows like this, things are happening on the fly. Can you just kind of describe what the job of a cameraman on a show like Mythbusters is?
Well, the job is to take, on any given day, look at it this way. Each story is about, let's say, 15 minutes long, but we might shoot 20 hours of tape. So we just roll on so much because you don't know when the magic's going to happen, when a disaster's going to happen, which is always good to have on camera. So we get there and as soon as the guys start working, the camera's up and we're rolling, and we're following them around all day. Interviewing them and making sure that they're let's say they're interviewing a contributor. We've gone somewhere and we've got someone who's an expert they're talking to. It's making sure that I can, with one camera back in those days, making sure that I can cover the interview so that it can be cut together, which was it was a bit of a stop and start thing. So I'd film, say, Jamie and Adam saying something, and then I've got to pan across. And you don't want to have all the pans. It's very hard to cut if you've got too many pans. This might be getting a bit technical, but so I'd just have to stop them for a second. I'd say, hold on. Then I'd move the camera and get the answer. Then I'd say, hold on. And I'd go back and get the next one. Hold on. But that way, when you can cut it together quite seamlessly, and it's much easier to edit than, the camera panning across all the time.
Yeah, I never would have thought about, especially in those interviews, that you weren't shooting with 2 or 3 cameras.
No, one camera.
You are 2 or 3 cameras in and of yourself, and that's.
I know. For the, in fairness, for the experiments, we had multiple cameras, but back in 2004, there was, it was well before GoPros. There was little Sony mini cameras that there was a camera head and then a cable which plugged into a little recorder on mini DV, I think most of them were. And, so pretty basic. And you look back at some of those early shows and the cameras were not high resolution at all. But it didn't really matter. They caught the action and that was the important thing.
That actually got to something that we've talked about on the show before that is amazing to me to think about now. If you work in production, for folks who are listening, if you work in production and there's kind of a shorthand, right, that everybody has of different types of shots or different ways to do things. If you tell someone you're doing an interview and you need 2 cameras and 3-point lighting, everybody knows what that means. You can all do it, right?
Yeah.
But what occurred to me watching Mythbusters is you guys are filming things that have never been filmed before. That there's no shorthand for, this is how you shoot an elevator shaft falling with a crash test dummy in it. Nobody's written that down. How did you guys go about thinking on stuff that you couldn't do twice? You couldn't pre-visualize it. How did you think about how to capture that for TV?
That was, we talked about a lot. I found it was always really good to talk to Jamie and Adam and Tori and Carrie and Grant, because they had probably a different appreciation of what was going to happen to me. So, I got a lot of good information from those guys. They're really smart guys and they've done so much of, this sort of stuff. But it was, I remember the elevator of death was a great example. My first thought when we were doing that, when I heard we were doing that myth, is like, who's going to let us drop an elevator in a shaft? We're going to wreck it. No one's going to let us do that. How does this work? I'd never done anything like this, and this was one of the early myths that I shot. And, our wonderful researchers found an abandoned building, which is where we did it. We dealt with a lot of abandoned buildings and vehicles and wrecks and stuff over the course of the show. And also for me, which was unusual, because I'm used to, at that point in my life, shooting with one camera, normally on any other show, I'd be filming the elevator. Bang, crash. But on this show, the myths, the responses of the hosts are really, really important. So we have the other cameras filming it, the little Sony, mini cam things. And I was actually, when that dropped, I had my back to that elevator. I wanted so much to be looking at it, and the temptation to turn around was so strong. I had to overcome it because I was filming Scotty and Carrie, and they're, Their expressions are really such an important part of this show. Their reactions are huge. It was a really, really hard thing. It went against all my background in shooting.
Especially since you could feel the whoosh as it went by.
The whoosh was strong. Yeah, the air getting pushed out of that shaft. It was a really exhilarating thing. It was loud and there was dust everywhere. And yeah.
There's a shot, we recently covered that episode, and there, a lot of the times after an explosion or something, everybody's laughing and there's that release. In that one in particular, there's this shot of Adam where he almost looks relieved. Like he looks like he's just been through something, and he says the feeling is so intense of that thing dropping and what it felt like to be in that building. It's incredible.
Oh, seriously, it was so intense. And just, once again, this was an early myth for me. So seeing so many things, we'd had to calculate how fast a human can jump, and then the guys made the spring contraption to get Buster to jump, and it had to trigger at just the right time, and they had to override the fail-safe mechanism so that the lift could drop. And then, of course, that meant there was no motor. Someone had stolen the motor for the copper or something. So Jamie had to bring in a motor that he had on a machine that he had, and we had to wire that in and drag the thing up and then put a quick release on it. And it felt like there was a lot of elements where it could have gone wrong. But, they made it all work. It's as they almost always did. It was quite incredible.
Well, and it's, with all of that going on, like, if a camera doesn't record, or if you miss the shot, there is no take two, right? I mean,
no.
How do you approach that?
Well, there was a very famous shot which was missed. I'm not sure if people are aware of it, but remember the concrete truck explosion?
Yeah.
That was in the opener and closer of the show for many years. Well, the high-speed operator had the camera trained on it. I'd filmed all of that myth, but I wasn't there on the final day for reasons that aren't very interesting. And I don't even remember which high-speed camera operator it is, so that's a good thing. But the way the high-speed camera worked was, it's not like a normal camera. You press the button and it starts recording. On a high-speed camera, especially of that era, you turned it on and the power was running and it's got a cache. And so, in other words, it had you hit the button for the end record. But it wasn't a physical button on the camera. You used a laptop to control it. And so he's sitting there with his hand on the mouse, and it's pretty tense. I mean, he'd never filmed a big explosion like this either. So he's got his hand on the mouse, and just after the explosion happens, that's when he's got to hit the button. And he does that, he clicks. Only one trouble. The mouse, the little pointer, had drifted off the mouse on the screen. So that shot that you see is the regular speed shot. There was no high speed shot.
Wow.
That never happened again. That never happened again on the show. I think, that of course becomes law, and probably as the cameras got better and the operators more experienced, then, that was all turned out. Yeah, it just never happened again.
It's such a small mistake to topple the whole thing,
And he just must have felt so bad. Yeah, what a disaster. Anyway.
That is like, for people who work in production, that's just like, like leaving the gas on or something.
Yeah.
That's just one of those, you lay in bed at night and go, wait, did I miss that?
Seriously.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Talking about high speed, I know that high speed would have been a separate operator, but I just would love to hear your thoughts on that, because watching Mythbusters, I've thought about before, is almost like seeing the history of high speed photography in real time, where in the pilots there's almost none. I don't even know if I can't even remember now if there is any. And then very quickly in the show, it goes from like very primitive to remarkably good high speed photography. And that becomes part of the whole storytelling approach of the show. What was the status of high speed at that point, and how did it kind of evolve as you guys were working on it?
Well, I had never worked with a high-speed camera before Mythbusters, and I very quickly came to see that not only was it a great way of showing what happens, but it was also obviously really good for the hosts, because when an explosion happens, the thing is there and then it's gone. And it's very hard to tell exactly what's happened, or a bullet is fired into something. And so oftentimes, as you know, they would review the footage and they would get so much information from doing that. But in addition to that, the first high-speed cameras, you could only record that 3-second period if you were in a really high frame rate. They also had a thing where the faster you got, so if you wanted to film a bullet, I think we often shot them at 5,000 frames per second or something, or maybe 10. But as you got up to those high frame rates, the size of the screen got smaller and smaller. So the size of the image, it actually couldn't use the full sensor. I guess it was just recording all that data was a big deal back at that point.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of what happened with explosions, and I remember this it was one with the chair, the Chinese emperor's rocket chair, or I think it was called, or something. And you expose for the chair sitting there, and it looks all lovely and it's nicely painted red and stuff. And then when all the rockets go off, all this smoke comes out, and it's very white. So it's much brighter than the chair. So the picture just overexposes dramatically. The cameras had very little latitude to, catch from dark to light. So the image quality wasn't great, but the information quality was really, really high still. So it still served a fabulous purpose, and each of those things got better and better. The cameras could go to higher frame rates and film in more detail. And they went from standard definition to high definition, and the colours got better and the exposure, so they didn't all blow out every time you had an explosion. So they're just a constant increase in quality. And in fact, by the end, I think we had one of the new ones and plus a slightly older one. So we had 2 high-speed cameras on some occasions.
Wow. Yeah, and it becomes too like, much in the way that at one point visual effects was a calling card of like, oh, you have to go see this movie, there's visual effects in it. High speed became a calling card of Mythbusters, where you would go, have you seen this show? Like, there's this high speed, like, you can see an explosion happen. And nobody had really seen that before, especially on television and in the way that you guys were doing it. So it also became kind of iconic for what Mythbusters is remembered for.
Yeah. And the other thing about high speed, previous to that, I mean, it was all done on cameras, which had a whole roll of film, and it would run so quickly. The whole roll of film would run through the camera in like seconds, or what would normally last 10 minutes or something. So it was expensive, and the timing was really hard. You had to, the camera had to get up to speed, and then you'd press the button for the explosion. So the timing would have just been a nightmare using film cameras. I never had the privilege of being present for any of that, but to have had an electronic camera where you could do it, a video camera where you could do it, was that in itself was a huge advance as well.
Something that we have started to have a lot of fun doing as we get to talk to folks who worked on the show is learning what different people brought to it. And now we watch the show and go, oh, this is an Anthony Griffiths episode because of all the puns. We can recognize it.
If there's wordplay in it,
it's probably
pretty
him.
likely, yeah.
Is there anything when you watch the show now or when you think back that you think of as a calling card or something that you can see yourself that you brought to the show?
I wouldn't say there's a calling card in that sense. Wow, that's an interesting question. I was watching an old episode recently, because my TV has now just recently got a new channel on it, and it's 24 hours a day Mythbusters. I can't believe that 21 years after I started shooting this show, there is a channel that is pure Mythbusters. Anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's gotta feel cool. Come on.
That is so cool. I do like watching the old episodes, but I was watching one. It was about making a car bulletproof with phone books. And and the build team was shooting just the door, the small scale experiment with a gun. And I said to my wife, I remember filming the end of this episode, but I don't remember filming this part of it. Maybe I wasn't there or something. And then they cut to a wide shot, and there was me. I had filmed it, but it was such a long time ago. It's
It's just another day at work, right?
Well, pretty much. Go to work. It was a great day. Work was great. You'd go to work, you'd build something, and then you'd blow it up.
And even if it doesn't blow up the first time, we'll find a way.
We'll find a way. Yeah.
That you mentioned the build team. I know that's something you spend a lot of time with. We just, as in our rewatch of the show, we've just seen kind of the birth of the build team from being introduced as these are people who build stuff to now they're Mythbusters and they have their own myths. It comes up so fast on the show, but immediately works. It seems like that was happening kind of around the same time that you came in. What do you remember about the evolution of that or that kind of era of the show?
Yeah, I started on pretty much the same day that the build team. And they were there. Initially, their job, as you're probably aware, was to come in. Jamie and Adam would work out what the myth was going to be, how they were going to approach it, and the idea was that they would say to the build team, "Okay, guys, we need you to build this." And so they would build it, and Jamie and Adam would get on with their myth and finish it. And then once the build was done, the guys would bring it back to Jamie and Adam, and then they'd conduct the experiment. But it didn't. And the idea was Discovery wanted more episodes, and Jamie and Adam could only produce, they're only two guys. You can only produce so much with one team. So the idea was this would allow more episodes to be made more quickly, but it just didn't work. We didn't get the economies of scale, if you like. So it was only, I would say, maybe a month or two. It didn't take long before they said, actually, you guys are going to be hosts now. So you're going to be a full-blown team. And yeah, it's funny because many times people do think of Mythbusters as Jamie and Adam, but the build team was there from really early on, very, very early. They're a huge part of the show.
It was funny for us in rewatching the show to see the era that was only Adam and Jamie felt so strange to go like, wait, there's a whole half of the show missing, and now that the build team's here, it's hard to imagine how they ever weren't there. Like, it just works. It works so well, and it clicks. Those personalities all work together. Do you remember anything about, like, something that we've asked a few people is Mythbusters often took people who were traditionally behind the scenes and put them on camera. And that's not an easy transition for a lot of people,
Well, that's all of the hosts. Every single one of them was behind the scenes. Yeah. So they're guys like you and us. Maybe there's a future for us in front of the camera.
Hey, we're doing it right now. We'll see. Do you remember having to, especially coming on as an experienced crew member, having to help some of the on-camera people learn, hey, here's what's going to look best. Here's how you can work to the camera more. Here's what's going to... Was there a lot of back and forth with that? Yeah,
there was quite a bit. I'm a one for brevity, and when you're doing a piece to camera, keep it concise. And so, I would always encourage them to maybe have a second crack and keep it short. And I didn't realise I was doing it, but Tori at one point said to me when I was working with those guys, if they were talking... He'd said, yeah, I know it's always time to finish because I'd hear you go, Apparently, I was unconsciously giving him a wind-up. Because I thought, you've said enough. Let's not flog this horse, It's like, you've said it. Stop. Give the editor somewhere to get out.
Oh, that's awesome.
We'll have to use that here, too. If we go for too long, you just give a curt... we'll know.
Harrison just starts talking about James Bond for a while, and I just,
What?
The worst thing was I had no idea I was doing it.
That's great. A little bit of extra directing going on.
Yeah, natural directing.
We were doing quite a bit,
So how did that work when it was with the build team in terms of was it at some point two separate crews, or was it all kind of jumping back and forth between Adam and Jamie and the build team?
We had two main cameras at the time. So once we got two teams, so you'd be with one with the build team for a while, and then with Jamie and Adam for a while. So we just kept mixing it up to keep it fresh, I suppose. Good to change from team to team. But you'd be with a team for probably a couple of months at a time.
And at a certain point, did they get their own shop? Am I remembering that correctly?
They did. So Jamie's shop was called M5, and the build team got their own shop, which was probably 200 yards away. About that. And it was called M6, because it was one more than M5. And it was all set up for them. That didn't last very long. I think maybe that when they got the lease, it wasn't really sure how long the build team would be around. We ended up, and I didn't like that shop anyway, because whenever you had a fire of some description or made some foul smell in it, like did we do skunks there? I think we did skunks there. It had really poor ventilation, so it didn't have an exhaust fan in it. And so once the stink got into it, it took ages to get it out. Yeah, and it was kind of a little bit of a funny shape. So we were there for probably 4 months, and then we moved from M6 to M7, which was a little bit further away. And that was a better workshop, and that's where the build team were based for the rest of the time. And that was it was a bit more space and a more usable space.
Do you have any? I know when you and I were emailing before this, we were talking about some episodes that you worked on and various things. But when you think back about Mythbusters, do you think about any favorites, any favorite myths, anything like that comes to mind?
I like some of the simple ones. And the ones that spring to mind actually both involve paper, which is one, the 7 paper fold.
Yes.
I think that's great because you can be a kid sitting there watching at home and go, oh, let me try that. And you pick up a bit of paper and you do it. I love the fact that it's so accessible to anyone. I think that's terrific. And of course, I think we got up to 11 with all sorts of heavy machinery and a piece of paper the size of a soccer field. And the other one involving paper was the phone book, interleaved phone books. You get a phone book and you interleave the pages, and the friction means you can't pull them apart. Yeah, they were fun. But look,
I remember that one distinctly.
Great. Yeah. And in fact, weirdly, my nephew sent me a photo recently. He says, it's funny the things that pop up in your engineering lecture. And he sent me a photo. The lecturer, this is in Melbourne, in Australia, had put up a photo on the projector of Adam and Jamie doing that myth, which I'd filmed. And there's me in the shot. So,
wow.
So, there's my uncle in my engineering lecture. So,
being taught.
Yeah.
It's teaching material now.
I am, apparently.
That is amazing. That's the thing, people often remember when we started this podcast and we tell people, oh, we're going to do a show about Mythbusters. They would go, oh, the show where stuff blew up. And you'd go, yes, but the reason that we still remember it 20 years later is that these were stories. It was great storytelling that you guys were engaging in. How did you think about that? You've talked about a little bit of, trying to make things that would cut together, but how did you think about your approach to storytelling on camera in Mythbusters? Because it seemed like there was a real story-driven ethos behind the show. Yeah,
and there's kind of a basic structure. Maybe I shouldn't say this because it's a bit of a closely guarded secret, but Mythbusters is actually a science show. Not many people realise that. So, there is a structure, you use the scientific method, which is you take a myth, then you analyse it and you discuss what it means and how would we test this. And so then we do a small-scale experiment usually. And then you analyse the results and you write it down, because if you're not writing the results down, as one of our contributors said once, you're just blowing shit up. Not wrong. And then you do the large scale. And if that is busted, say, and you need to blow something up, well, like the cement truck, you then blow the cement truck up. That was something that was thought of afterwards, because the myth had actually been finished on the cement truck. And one of the guys back in Sydney, one of the senior producers at Beyond, he's like, in fact, he might be the VP, sorry. But he's like, you know what, I think we need something else. Why don't we blow up a cement truck at the end? So that was all kind of just a little bit of fun on the end of the science experiment, if you like.
Yeah.
Wow. I never would have thought about that wasn't part of the original structure.
No. So that's why I missed out, because I'd gone on break already. I was in Mexico with the family, and they blew the truck up without me. I was like, I wanted to be there.
I just want to say, if anybody who employs me is listening, I'd really appreciate a note on something I've done this is great, but could you blow up a cement truck at the end instead? That's the best note you could possibly get.
Seriously. And can you also capture it on high speed?
Wow. Well, there's no wonky mouse motions, maybe. Maybe.
Oh, man. Well, we have a really nice surprise for our listeners, but not just our listeners, also for Harrison. because Peter, you have shared with us some amazing behind-the-scenes photos and video from your time on the show. And obviously, for folks who are listening to the podcast, this is not a visual experience for you, but you can go to our YouTube channel and go to our Instagram, and we're going to put this up as well. But what I'm going to do is throw these up for Harrison to see, and I would just love to talk to you about your memories of these photos and what comes to mind.
Well, that one that's just there with that robot, that was a robot that Jamie had built. That was not anything to do with Mythbusters, but I did get to drive that, which was crazy. And it was, and I got someone to film a little video. It's terrible quality, but I'm driving this thing, and I remember sending it to my kids, and they just thought, that is so cool. And the main motors on that were actually out of cordless drills.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're cheap, they're powerful. And also Jamie he invented a type of joint for the elbows or the shoulders, I can't remember. It was a really clever joint, but I think he patented it. So that's, yeah.
It's amazing that there's a giant robot, and it's like, oh, that's not from the TV show.
No, that's just around. That's just in the office.
Yeah, and he made it was for an ad, I think there was robots that were they were on a production line painting cars or something, putting cars together. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he pulled together a team and they made like 3 of these robots, different designs, in some ridiculously short period of time, like 6 weeks or 3 weeks or something just crazy. I couldn't believe it when I saw them.
That is unreal.
Yeah, and that was the elevator of death myth where we had to have dust masks on and stuff. I wasn't used to filming in a dust mask. That was probably the first time I ever did it.
Was that because of that old hotel?
Yeah, it was an old, single residency occupancy hotel. It was full of dirty old dust and probably asbestos, and it had been empty for a long time. But
this shot is amazing, seeing the actual Buster shooting rig, the lifting rig, and everything in the elevator.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It was. These were early days for me. I was just like, wow, what is happening in here? And the other thing on the show was we lit very little. You had to light for the high-speed camera, but mainly we were just shooting in available light. And you just had to make the most of what was there. Because that was, kind of the ethos of the show, keep it real. And, it was also the first show that I'd ever worked on where camera crew, got into the background of shots, and producers and people who would normally be forbidden to be anywhere, anywhere in shot.
It's so fun. Oh, go ahead.
Even sometimes go back and forth. I love that sometimes there'll be like a little joke between the cameraman and the host. It's just fun. It's real. It's grounded.
I remember when we were filming the skunk myth, and I'm filming Adam, and suddenly he leaps up and starts hugging me because he's covered in the skunk stink, and he's putting it on me. I don't know if that made it into the show. I can't remember now, but it
actually did, and it had not dawned on me that was you. We just talked about that on the show not long ago.
Yeah, that was me. And of course, being from Australia, I'd never smelled a skunk. All I knew of skunks was, from the cartoon Pepe Le Pew, and how horrible skunk was. But it's not as bad as I thought, to be honest. Oh, there was an interesting story here. So this was Richard Hill, or AKA Bones, and that's his daughter. And the myth was that, someone bought a whole bunch of helium balloons and gave them at the carnival and gave them to the kid, and the kid lifted off and took off and floated away. So we discovered you did need quite a lot of balloons, and we got his daughter airborne eventually. But afterwards, we had thousands of balloons. It took days to blow them all up, and it took quite a while to pop them all as well. And there was a retirement village nearby, so we're popping these balloons, and someone in the retirement village thinks they're hearing gunfire. So next thing, the cops turn up, and they've got guns drawn. Get on the ground! And we're all like, whoa! And the ground was filthy, and we've all had to lie on the ground. And the cops and our safety officer, who he was shooting them with a BB gun to pop some. And he's got up off the ground with his BB gun and he's walking towards the police. And I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't walk towards the cops with a gun. They don't know if it's a BB gun or what. Luckily, he put it down and no one was killed or even winged. Yeah, that was and once again, this is my first few months on the show, and I'm like, this is crazy. We've just about been in a gunfight with the cops over a myth.
This happen often, guys? Is this what I can expect?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. And there's so I'm not sure if Faz Andrew told you that he actually came over and directed for a while. Did he mention that?
He did. Is this Andrew in the shot?
Yeah, that's him talking to.
Wow.
Well, you know who he's talking to. Yeah, there's another one too. He's with the build team. That's probably coming up in a sec. Yeah, there's me with the build team. That was for the ceiling fan of death. They had another one which I just was like, wow, what a myth. And there he is, there's Faz with the build team.
We see Scotty here on the in the photo. She was such a huge part of the early days of the build team, but then didn't ultimately end up in the show. What do you remember about Scotty? She's somebody that we've been talking a lot about this season.
Oh, I loved Scotty. She was great. She brought such great skills, all her welding and metalworking skills and working with cars skills. She was a real asset. Yeah, I don't know. I just think she wasn't really comfortable being on camera or something. I'm not really sure why she didn't come back. I was quite surprised.
Yeah.
I guess being on camera is not for everyone.
Oh, for sure. We've yet to, in our rewatch, we're getting close to the Grant days, and we're very excited for that. Grant was always one of my favorites when I was watching the show back in the day, and so I'm excited to get into that era once again. Yeah.
So this one, I didn't shoot this myth. There's as Faz again, Andrew, building snowmen. So I think the myth was that if you a clothed snowman would melt more quickly. No, wouldn't melt as fast as an unclothed snow. I can't remember. I put that one in just mainly because Faz was in it.
That's so great. Building snowmen in San Francisco.
Yeah, you're right. Downtown.
Yeah, Carrie with rebuilding Buster. He got busted up pretty bad a lot of times, but he was a real trooper. He was always willing to take one for the team. Very heavy too. He was dangerous to work with because he weighs as much as he was 180 pounds or something, I think. And those, he's supposed to simulate a human being.
Wow.
So moving him around and getting him into position was always a chore. And not only a chore, but those elbows and all the joints, you had to be very careful not to get your fingers caught in them because there was a lot of weight and you'd really get pinched badly in those. So he was loved but dreaded. I love once again, early days, Jamie making a mechanical hand. Yeah, I just like that one for the sparks. Yeah,
amazing.
He's in his element.
Yeah. And
so is this the full crew?
This is the full San Francisco crew, yeah. I think we had roughly 25 people over there on most stages, and I think there was even more in post-production back in Sydney. So it ended up being a pretty full-size crew, pretty decent number of people, and it had to be just to, keep the pipeline fed, I suppose, really.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, that was outside M7, the other workshop. Oh, and I was going to say before too, when we moved from M6 to M7, Tori and I basically moved the shop. There was a couple of huge drill presses and stuff that they got someone to move with a proper heavy duty thing, but we moved everything else, the two of us. We loaded up that truck time and time again and carted it all over, and I thought, this is pretty unusual for a cameraman to be doing, but I did a lot of things on that show that you wouldn't normally do as a cameraman.
I can only imagine. On Mythbusters,
this is inside
No, go ahead.
Just saying, this is inside the cement truck. This was only supposed to have a light coating of cement in there. That was what the myth is, that you would be able to dislodge the light coating. And they misunderstood and poured like several cubic yards of concrete into it. And when we got there the next day and we hopped inside, it was a cool day outside, but it was hot in there and humid. And that was when I really learnt that concrete was very much an exothermic reaction. It doesn't dry, it sets. And it generates heat when it does it. So it was really hot. But it was also really cool to be in there. Who goes inside a cement truck?
Yeah. I mean, the the various places that I'm sure you got to see or things you got to see and be a part of, do any stand out of either locations or people you met or anything like that?
So many. So many. I did love walking under the supersized myths when we blew away the bus and a small plane. You know, we were out in Michigan at this old Air Force base, and I was walking. I remember saying to the guy who was kind of supervising, making sure we weren't injured, who was from the company that owned the 747. I said, "Is there anything I should be aware of while the 747's taxiing out to the position where we're going to do the experiment?" And he's like, "Yeah, just the wheels. Stay away from the wheels." I'm like, "Yeah, I know that bit." But it was just like, who gets to walk under a rolling 747? No one. Or go into the cockpit and get the pilot pushing up to full power while you're sitting there at a standstill. No one gets to do that. It was great. And going up to Alaska and doing moose myths and just the locations we went to was fantastic. I've been hit by a Roger Clemens. We saw Roger Clemens a minute ago, the picture. I've been hit by a Roger Clemens fastball when we were doing baseball myths.
Oh, my gosh.
Can't feel good.
In fairness, the ball had actually hit the bat and slowed down and then just tapped me. Technically still a Roger Clemens fastball. But,
technicalities.
Technicality.
Oh, man, that is so cool. What is this that we're looking at?
That was just... I can't even tell you. That was probably several myths that... I don't know. Yeah, I can't remember.
Would this have been like a planning board, though?
Yeah. There was always planning boards, a list of all the myths that we were doing, where we were up to in them, and what was coming up next. And so the research team, our researchers, did just the most phenomenal job. I mean, the stuff they would come up with for us, the places to go, the things to see, go to NASA facilities and have vacuum environments where you could drop a hammer and a feather. I remember learning about that in high school, but there I was watching it in real life. I'd heard about it in theory, but we got to actually do it. It was so cool.
That's so cool.
It's absolutely amazing.
Because it's hard. Like, you can be told they'll hit the ground at the same thing, but it's different to see it. It's way different to see it. Yeah,
absolutely. I learned so much, and I was always interested in that, and there'd be sometimes Jamie and Adam would be working out how they were going to do a certain myth. And I remember I would sometimes I would say, "Oh, what about if you did it like this? What about if you did it like that?" And at one point Jamie said to me, "Heapy, it can be a bit annoying sometimes when the crew's always piping up with ideas." He says, "Because, we are the experts." He said, "Think about how you'd like it if we were always telling you how to do your job." And I went, "Oh my God, he's right. Oh, okay. Better cut back with the unnecessary and unneeded suggestions and ideas." But oftentimes I'd still be thinking about why they doing it this way, or maybe they could do it that way. And to get it off my chest, I'd take the sound recorders to the Matty Jepson or maybe our writer, and I'd take them outside the room and I'd say, "Why don't they do it like this?" And they'd go, "Yeah, good idea." And I go, "Great, let's go. We'll go back in again now." I just had to get up. And sometimes I would. There was not very many times this happened, but there were some times when I'm just looking at it going, "Why are they doing it that way?" And there was one in particular they'd been talking about it on and off, the way they were going to do a myth, and I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. I said, "What if you did it like that?" And they both went, And then Adam turns to Jamie and says, "Good idea, Jamie." And they did it. They did use my idea a couple of times. So.
There it is.
As we head towards wrapping up, I think we've teased people long enough, and we have to hear about the houseboat.
The houseboats. The houseboats were just so much fun. We ended up living in maybe 10 different houseboats in Sausalito.
Wow.
So they're really more like floating homes. So there's very few actual boats there, and most of them have got concrete hulls. They sit there, but they go up and down with the water, and it is such a beautiful environment to live in. And also the community was really, really cool, because you park in the parking lot and then you walk down the dock and there's hundreds of houseboats and you meet a lot of your neighbours. And it was just a really, really great community. And I met a really great friend, Michael. He was a Czech photographer, and he had the little boat. We'd go out water skiing. Well, actually, I would go out scurfing, just straight from the houseboats. You hop on his little boat, you'd go out there in the San Francisco Bay, and I'd be on a surfboard behind his boat. And it's like, this is ridiculous. What a life. You could do it for work sometimes, you know. It was so good.
I now want to see the show about the Mythbusters crew. It sounds like there was 1,000,001 stories just behind the camera, much less what we saw on camera. That every time we get to talk to you guys who worked on the show, it's like there's a reason that what came across on camera is as fun and has the life in it that it does, is because you guys, that's how you were too. It wasn't just what you were capturing. It just wasn't what you were making, you know?
Yeah, we were having fun. I certainly was, you know. Spending a month down in the Bahamas doing Shark Week. Come on. How good is that? I love scuba diving. It was, you know, I was happy as. Yeah. And
I get to put Jamie in a cage?
Yeah. Nah. Well, Adam was in the cage. I was outside the cage with the shark.
Oh. What's
That's
that
all right.
production meeting like?
Yeah. Can I just tell you one other thing that was a fun thing for me was...
Yeah.
You can cut this out if you want.
Yeah, please do.
We were doing the thing in Alabama in the NASA facility where we were dropping the hammer and the feather. And during the lunch break, I said to the NASA scientists, I said, so I've always heard that, you know, if a body is in space, that the blood boils, but how can that be? Because I know if you're in direct radiation from the sun, it's really hot, but if you're behind, say, the spaceship, it's really cold. Mm-hmm. So how does the blood boil? He says, well, here's the thing. And he set up a little experiment for me, nothing to do with what we were shooting. He got a beaker of water and he put a bell jar over it and attached a little vacuum pump. And as he pulled a vacuum on it, sucked the air out, the air pressure inside started to drop and the water started boiling.
Oh my God.
And the water was boiling at I can't remember exactly when, maybe 40 degrees. It's boiling. And then, but it's not boiling furiously, but you look at the water and there's bubbles forming in it. That's steam, that's water vapor, that's boiling.
Right.
So I always thought of boiling as being a function of heat, but it's a function of heat and pressure. And he displayed this for me at lunch, and then even better than it boiling was on top of the water, it was only about this deep, a layer of ice formed. And you can still see the water boiling under the ice. And I'm like, you're doing my head in, man. And it took me, I had to think about it for days to understand what I had just seen. But this wasn't even part of the show. This was just like a bit of fun, you know?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I still don't get it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to play this back a couple of times.
Yeah.
Even sometimes on the show, they'll show it to me. And I'm
it's in one of those videos I sent to you, so you can have a look at it.
Oh, very cool. Okay, yeah, we'll have to we can cut that in over that portion as you're talking about it. That's so cool.
It was not a very good video. It was just shot on a little point and shoot thing. It's rubbish quality, but I've got one other thing I forgot to mention too.
No, go for it.
Okay, so I can't remember why I saved this. This is a little, his leg's fallen off. This is a little model that Adam made one day for,
wow.
What was it? It was Whirlpool of Death. Now, that was in the little model, and then of course Adam was in the other one. And the other thing, which I was given towards the end of my time on the show, which was as a gift, was...
Whoa!
You see that? The Mythbusters sign. Well, one of the Mythbusters signs. So...
Whoa, that is so cool.
We have talked a lot, actually, like wondering what happened to a lot of the individual stuff.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I've got this and that. I thought I had a blueprint or two, but I couldn't find them. But, yeah.
Now, would you also shoot a lot of those kind of interstitials with the Mythbuster signs or the busted signs or all the stuff that we would see?
Yeah, in the early days, towards the end, it became a job of the second cameraman who did all the GoPro shots and the high-speed shots and stuff. Yeah, so they would generally do that. Because I was usually too busy working with the host.
Because some of those shots of the signs that they would use, kind of as bumpers in and out, were really elaborate, of like the melting and ice and all those kinds of, those sequences were really cool and different than the rest of the show in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was always fun to do those. It was, something you had a bit of time to think, what can we do creatively with this and try and make it look nice, and sometimes we'd even light it.
So for our audience, I'm sure folks would love to hear, obviously Mythbusters was a huge part of your career, but you've shot a lot of stuff since then. What have you been up to since the Mythbusters days, and what are you working on today?
Well, like Faz, I've worked on a lot of crime stuff, shows like Deadly Women and a show about serial killers, Dark Minds it was called. Those were all, we shot all those in the States, but most recently I've been filming a show called Outback Opal Hunters, and most of the opal in the world is mined in Australia, just in a few locations. So I go out to these places in the outback, and I work with these guys who they dig holes in the ground, and they've got this really old machinery, and the machinery limps along, and it's dangerous. But if you find opal, it can be really rewarding. It's very expensive. It's more valuable than gold by weight. It's like very...
Whoa.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'll be heading out to the outback in a few weeks to do some more.
That is so cool. How do you feel all these years later? Something that we love to ask folks is how they look back at their time on Mythbusters. And based on the fact that you're still doing this today, are there things from Mythbusters that you still, that lessons that you learned that you still find yourself using, or how do you think about those years and what they meant to you?
I've only got happy memories. I mean, we worked hard. We were tired oftentimes, but it was such a great experience. It was such a great show. I feel very grateful to have had the opportunity to work on it and to meet all the other people who worked on it. Lessons, I think, lessons is, I love just watching those guys do stuff so fast. They're so efficient, and they just get stuff made so quickly, and they don't muck about. And I like seeing that. I felt like that. I introduced that into my life for a while, but I think it's faded a little bit. Reverted to type, as it were. And just seeing them use, I remember the first time I saw them put a bit of aluminum, or aluminium as I would call it, into a saw with a wood blade on, like a power saw, And I'm like, you can't do that. And they're like, yeah, of course you can. Or using a belt sander on foam. You don't use, what, on foam? Like, that, the belt sander. Oh yeah, it works. Just all they knew how to use tools for purposes they were never intended for. And, I just loved watching that, and I loved learning from them. And I learned so much. It was great.
Well, where can folks find you now? Are you on social at all, or is there anything folks should check out?
I am, but I don't really put much on socials.
I'm with you. I think that's the right call.
Better for your mental health.
Well, if you want to see my work, just tune into the 24-hour-a-day Mythbusters channel.
There you go. Watch more Mythbusters. That's what we always advise our audience to do. Well, Peter, we are so appreciative of you taking the time and for being such a massive part of the show that we love. We say this to everybody. We get to feel like we play in the sandbox that you guys created, and we're really grateful for that. And every time that we get to speak with one of you guys, we want to make sure you know what it has meant to the fans who have watched the show all these years, and to us now getting to cover it. So thank you for what you did, and thank you for what you're doing now.
My pleasure. Thank you. Good to speak to you.